Hey guys, today we're in my truck because we're on our way to Harbor Freight to pick up the new Predator 30-ton log splitter. It's November 12th, 2025, and this thing is really brand new. Very few out there yet. I'm one of the first ones to get one. Let's go pick it up and put it together. And that was really easy. Here we are all loaded up and ready to go. Big box, and luckily I've got a tractor to take this thing off, so let's get it home. All right, guys, so if you buy one of these, this is what you're going to end up with. It's in a crate. It's about 5.5 feet long, and it weighs a little over 500 pounds. So you're going to need a way to get it out of your truck or your trailer. I'm going to use my tractor with pallet forks, and hopefully we get this thing off without any drama, and we can take a look inside. All right, so here we are a couple of minutes later. I took one more side off of the crate because the beam here is heavy. I'm going to see if I can spin this around and just pick that up with the pallet forks. In fact, I'm sure I can. And basically the assembly seems to be, this is the tow bar. This connects to that piece. You put on some of the fenders and crap, and then you attach this beam, which is probably going to be the most challenging part of the whole thing. If you're wondering why I didn't do a time lapse of the whole unboxing, it's because I don't do that. And when I see a video with that, I always skip over it. I personally don't care. If you do care, sorry. I also changed my gloves from those winter things I was wearing to my actual work gloves from the Vermont Glove Company. I am not sponsored by these guys, but if you want a pair of work gloves that's going to last, I suggest you buy these. So I'm going to put the basic stuff together here, and I'll film the parts that are important. So let's get going. All right, so here's one step I wasn't expecting, which is basically to pack the wheel bearings before you install the wheels. So I just did that. And one other quick thing I want to show you before we get too deep into this. So let's take a look at that next. One thing I wanted to point out, the first thing the instructions tell you to do is put this in the down position and then bolt it onto this hydraulic oil tank rear axle assembly. Well, before the wheels are on there, it's a lot easier to do that with this thing not folded down. So that's the way that I did it. Your mileage may vary. You need a 19mm socket and wrench for these two bolts that hold this on. The fender bolts and nuts are 16mm. And then the wheels, aside from the fact that you need to grease pack, the wheel bearings go on there with no issues. So I think the next thing is going to be to get that beam out of there and on. So let's take a shot at doing that. All right, guys, as you can see, I wheeled this thing outside a little bit so we could take advantage of some better natural light. I put the beam on without using my tractor. So basically, I took another side off of the crate. I carefully lifted this thing out one end and then the other, and then you basically stand it up on this end. Now, it's heavy, but it wasn't heavy enough that I couldn't do that by myself. The instructions do recommend you have somebody to help you out. I would strongly recommend that. But basically, it's stand this up, back the frame into it, and put in this one pin that the whole thing pivots on. Be super careful. I would recommend you have somebody help you out. And if you go to lift this thing, you're going to know in 2 minutes if it's just too heavy for you or not. Be really careful. So at this point, it's starting to look like a log splitter. I don't think there's a lot left to do, but let's take a look and get it done. Okay, so here we are, all done. I had to bolt the engine on. That was really straightforward. The hydraulic lines, this is the low pressure line. It only goes one way. This is the high pressure line. We've got the return line on the bottom. This handle ship's just hanging down there. You have to pick it up and put the pin in. Didn't see that in the manual, but that's pretty self-explanatory. And that's really it. Now, it's day 2 because the weather was crappy yesterday and I ran out of light. But the hydraulic reservoir ships empty, and that holds 5 gallons. So I had to run out to Tractor Supply and buy 5 gallons of oil, hydraulic oil. And then there's no mention in the manual about whether or not the engine ships with oil. However, there is this tag that says, before use, add engine oil below. And when I pull that dipstick out, it looks like it's dry. Now, I'll show you the shot in the manual that tells you how to measure it. But from what I can tell, when I pull out my dipstick, there's nothing on it. And when I stick my finger in there, I can't feel any oil. So it only takes a half a quart. So we're going to fill that up. We're going to fill up the reservoir. I'm just going to go over quick, make sure I didn't miss anything here. And then we're ready to fire this thing up and try it out. So before we get into that, 2 seconds about why I bought this particular machine, sight unseen. All right, so again, it's November 13th today. I ordered this thing about 2 weeks ago. At the time, there were no reviews on the Harbor Freight website, and there were absolutely no YouTube videos. As of today, there's 1 review and 1 video. So this is one of the first models actually shipped and reviewed. And when I look at it and I compare it to the other 30-ton or even 27-ton from the competitors, number one, it's hundreds of dollars less. I've been really impressed with the quality from Harbor Freight over the course of the last few years. Their higher end tools are really, really good. And this thing is serious. This thing is put together well. The fit and finish is good. The hardware is a step up from what I've seen before. So far, no complaints whatsoever. And of course, I used a coupon for this. For anything other than, $10 that I buy at Harbor Freight, I try to use a coupon. So it was $1,104 before tax out the door. $1,104. So even when you figure in the fact that I had to put it together, I had to spend $50 on hydraulic fluid, it is still a great deal, in my opinion, assuming that it works the way that I expect it to. So I'm going to go through and do the oil, get everything ready to go. I'm not going to film that unless I find something unusual, and then we'll see how this thing works. Okay, so it's like 15 minutes later. So what did I do? I took out the dipstick and I used my very sophisticated oil checking mechanism to find out that the crankcase was completely dry. No oil at all. It says it takes a half a quart. I put in about 19 ounces before I got it on the dipstick where it's supposed to be. Half a quart is probably the oil change interval, so I'm not really concerned about that. I also completely overfilled the hydraulic reservoir. It says it takes 19 liters. It's a little over 5 gallons, just barely. I got to the point where I was most of the way through with 5 gallons and it spilled a little bit. That's why I moved the machine, because if it leaks when I run it for the first time, I want to see it. And again, the fact that it overflowed doesn't surprise me, because 5 is probably the capacity of the entire machine. So I fueled it up a little bit, and I am going to turn the fuel on. There's a little lever on the side here. I'm going to turn the choke on. I'm going to turn the ignition switch on. And the throttle right now is pretty tight, but it's okay. I'm going to put it at about half throttle. And let's give it a pull and see what happens. Okay. Perhaps I have the choke on the wrong side. Try that. Choke in the middle. All right, the choke seems to work the opposite way that I expected, but that's okay. Okay, not bad. Now, I clearly misread the instructions for the choke. So looking at the engine, the choke all the way to the right-hand side is on, all the way to the other side is off. Other than that, and the throttle is the opposite. So the throttle all the way to this side is run fast. The other side is slow. Looks like it's working. I didn't hear any strange noises there, and I don't have any leaks. So that being said, I got to drag this thing over to my wood pile, or perhaps just go grab a couple of logs and see if we can split them here. In fact, I might just do that. So let me see what I got over there ready to go, because I do have a whole bunch of logs, but I got to buck them up before we do anything. Let me see if I have a couple laying around, and we'll actually run this thing through the paces. So after I ran it for a couple of minutes there, I opened up the hydraulic reservoir and checked it. And as expected, once there's hydraulic fluid in the system, the tank level dropped a couple of inches. I topped it back off with what was left in that 5-gallon bucket. Made a little bit of a mess because it's hard unless you have a really big funnel to pour with the log catchers in the way. I also checked the engine oil to make sure it was okay, and it is. And then I noticed while I was taking off the plug on that reservoir, this is the first tool I ever bought from Harbor Freight about 15 years ago. It's a very inexpensive 15-inch Pittsburgh adjustable wrench. I bought it because I needed a big one to put on the nut on my on the ball on my trailer hitch. I also bought a 1,200-pound air motorcycle lift that they used to sell on that same day. That was why I drove 100 miles 15 years ago to get to that store. My, how things have changed. This is not an expensive tool. It's not a high quality tool. I think it was $7 when I bought it, but it comes in handy when you need it. Okay, so I grabbed a couple of pieces of wood to just try this thing out. This first one, it's just a small log. It should be easy. This guy here with a split, with a branch in it, you can see I took a couple of whacks with the axe and it didn't want to go. I've got another one similar. Not necessarily a good test, but I just want to see this thing work, and then we're going to put it to work on my wood pile. So hopefully this thing starts up in one pull. We can split these 3 pieces and see how it goes. You gotta love that. Now, again, this is a 30-ton machine, and that was nothing. And that's what I have. That's what I have available right now. So no big rounds there, nothing crazy. But it went through that like butter, which is what I would expect. You see a little smoke coming off of the exhaust. That's just the paint curing. And otherwise, this thing seems to be pretty good. So where does that leave us, guys? Well, it leaves me in the rain now. So instead of bucking the wood, I think I'm going to put that off until tomorrow. And I will do a test on this once I go through about a quart of wood and let you know what I really think of it. But I'll tell you this, for $1,100, $50 worth of hydraulic fluid, and a couple of hours of your time, this is still hundreds of dollars less than the competition. And from what I've seen of machines at Tractor Supply and at Home Depot, and those are really the only two places near me that have log splitters, this is as good as, if not better, for what I see at this price point. Got to see if it holds up, but right now all indications are that it will. So stay tuned. We'll have more content coming. I'm pretty happy so far. And do me a favor, if you like this kind of content, give me a like, give me a subscribe, drop any comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your own your woodshed and your own log splitting activity. See you soon.